Hi folks, welcome to the latest video. Today we're going to have a look at overnight charging and also a couple of things that are worth mentioning. We've now had Octopus Go tariff approved, so that now gives us very cheap charging overnight from 12:30 midnight till 4:30 in the morning, so 4 hours at 5p a kilowatt hour. Took a little while to get it activated. The switch to Octopus was really easy, but we couldn't switch to Octopus Go until they'd managed to get some smart meter readings from us. And then there was a little bit of glitch on the website. All it took was a phone call, and eventually they sorted it very, very quickly over the phone. Really friendly, really helpful, so I'm quite chuffed with that. So we're actually in the position now where we can try and take advantage of the cheap charging and see how many miles we're going to get in the tank in 4 hours, and also see what the cost of that has worked out at. So this is quite an interesting one. But before we start, I think it'd probably be a good idea to have a look at the dash again, have a look at where we are, show you where the charging timer is set up, and then we'll see what happens overnight. So looking at the dash, what we can see, we've got about a quarter of the charge left, and a quarter of range available, and looking at that, that's coming out at 58 miles. Okay, so the next thing we need to look at is the main screen, and this gives me a chance to show you a neat little feature on the car that I didn't like when I first saw it, but actually now I've used it, really like. So we're currently on the sat-nav screen, and what you can see is beneath the screen we've got this little strange keyboard layout, and when I first saw this I wasn't actually that keen. I just thought it looked a little bit odd, but now we've come to use it, it's actually really cool. The buttons across the top there, they're all shortcuts to different sections on the main screen. So if we hit the music button, for instance, that takes us straight to music on the screen. Again, if we hit the fan button, that takes me to the heating system. And the one we're really interested in for this particular video is charge, and that takes us to the charging screen. And again, from here we've got 2 or 3 things we can do. Firstly, we can see what the battery looks like. So we've got 2 out of the 8 cells still available, so we've got 6 cells that we need to charge. Next thing we have is statistics. I think we can ignore these for now. I think I've just realised why the mile per kilowatt hour is so high, and that's basically because I'm sitting in the car not going anywhere. So those 7.5 kilowatt hour distances that I've got at 5 and 15 minutes ago, basically I think that's me going nowhere. I think the more realistic ones are these numbers over here, which I would say are probably 3 to 4 kilowatt, probably getting off 3.5 to 4, and that, if you look at that, that's sort of getting you into the 200 mile range, probably a little bit less with these 2 a bit further down. So I think we can't trust this at the moment. We'd have to be driving a little while to trust these numbers. But the one we're obviously interested in is the charge one. And here we can see the instructions for putting a deferred charge time. And that's what we need to use with the Octopus Go tariff, is we basically don't want to charge the car until 12:30 tonight. So we need to see what happens with that. And you can see that basically what it tells me to do is to select the time that we want to charge. So we can set that to half midnight, and then it says plug in the vehicle and press the button next to the socket. The annoying thing is it says it can also be activated using the phone, and this is the one thing that we've failed to get working so far, is the phone app. And in fact the reason I'm sitting in the car at the moment is I've just done a call to Peugeot, and I've opened a case with their remote services team to try and get that sorted for us. There's some sort of glitch on the app that's causing a bit of a problem, so hence I'm having to do this in the car rather than sitting in our lounge. So that's where we're at, and what we'll do now is we will basically plug the car in, press the button next to it, and see if that kicks off the deferred charging. So let's see what happens. Right, so here we go. Let's plug in the car first of all, which we've got there. You'll notice the button there and the green light, and apparently we need to press the timer button, and that's the first time I've seen that go blue, so I'm assuming that means it's in timer mode. Okay, we'll leave it and see what happens in the morning. Morning everyone, it's the morning after the night before, so to speak. So we put the car on charge last night, set the charger to kick in at 12:30 in the morning, and firstly we want to see whether it's worked, and secondly we can then calculate what the cost of charging was using cheap rate energy. So let's have a look at what we've got. We're looking at 190 miles of range, and if we have a look over here we can see that all the cells are charged. So the good news is that means the timer worked, and more importantly I've worked out how to use the timer, so that's good news. So the question is, how much energy did we use to achieve this, and what did it cost? Right, so we've collected all the data, and all that's left to do now really is crunch the numbers and see what the cost is going to work out at, and get some sort of idea of the cost savings involved as well, which is quite useful. So let me share with you some calculations. So before we start crunching the numbers, what we also need to do is understand a little bit about the cost of the energy that we're using. Now again, in previous videos I've talked about the fact that we've switched to Octopus for our energy and become our energy provider, and also mentioned that we were in the process of transitioning to their Octopus Go tariff. You need a smart meter to do this. You have to use the standard tariff first, have a smart meter, and then you can transition to the Octopus Go tariff. And the reason we've gone for this is basically because of their energy rates. So what we can see here, they have a special rate for EV owners where we basically pay 5p per kilowatt hour between half midnight and 4:30 every night. And they reckon on that basis that your fuel is going to cost you about 1p a mile to drive your car. And that's really what we want to try and prove or disprove here, is how much is it really going to cost to drive the car using cheap energy. It's also worth mentioning that the cost of the fuel outside of these time slots is 13.7p a kilowatt hour, and that's reasonably in line with most energy electricity providers, but it is actually important in these calculations because it did take longer than 4 hours to charge the car, which I expected in fairness, so we would be using some energy at this price. Now, it's also worth talking about the referral scheme again. I had a referral code from a friend who told me about the Octopus rates, and basically by using their referral code, he got £50, I got £50, and that's basically gone into my as a credit on my account, and that will be used to basically help pay for the energy that I'm using. So that's worth knowing. If you haven't got any friends who can give you a code, then feel free to use mine. Obviously we both benefit from that, but basically you get £50 on your account, and we'll have a look again a bit later what that means in real terms regarding energy and mileage, because it is quite surprising when you see those numbers. So when you log on to your Octopus account, basically every day you can review the previous day's energy usage, and you can sort of scroll around the charts and stuff that they create. And this is what we've got here. So let's just review this chart. Firstly, we can see at midnight till 12:30, we were using very little energy, and that would be literally just having phones plugged in and devices on standby, that sort of stuff. And then at half midnight, as per the timer on the car, we can see that charging kicks in. And in the first half hour, it used 3.55 kilowatt hours of energy. And we can see that through the night, it was roughly around that sort of number as it's charging the car. It starts to drop here in the last half hour there, we can see. And then what we can also see, it drops even further when we get to 5 o'clock, where it's only using 1.69 kilowatts of energy. Now, the reason for this is in this time slot here, the car would have reached 80% charge. And what the car automatically does is slow down the charge rate once it gets to 80%, and that protects the battery during charging. So it obviously switched into lower mode here somewhere, which is why it's a bit lower. And then for the next couple of hours, it was using less energy because it was charging the last 20% more slowly. and it would have been in this half-hour time slot that the charge would have finished. So that's when it stopped, and then we went back into standby mode for the rest of the house, basically. So there we can see the kilowatt hours. Now what I've done is I've taken a note of all the kilowatt hour usages in each half-hour time slot, and then what we've done here is multiplied them by 5 pence. So each half hour of full charge was working in about 17, 18 pence. So in total, that 8 hours of charge, 8 half hours of charge cost £1.43 to charge the car. Then we can see this is where it drops a little bit, but now we're at the 13.7 pence rate. So as we can see here, these last 4 half hours actually cost nearly as much without using anywhere near as much energy, and that's because we're at the higher rate. But if we add the two together, what we can then see is our total charge cost. So it costs £2.44 to charge the car. And if we remember the numbers from earlier in the video, fully charged, the car had 190 miles. When we started, we had 59. So what we've basically done is we've put 131 miles onto the car for £2.44. And that works out at basically 1.86 pence a mile to run the car. Now, that for me is a worst case scenario, because what I've realised now is if I didn't let the car get this low, let's say I let the car get down to 100 miles and then plugged it in and set the timer, then most of my charging, if not all of my charging, would be done in these 8 slots. And my gut feel is if we charged all of the charges in those half-hour slots there, I think we'd be very, very close to the penny a mile that Octopus were quoting on their page. And that for me is mind-blowing. A penny a mile to drive your car is just ridiculous. It's superb. I thought I'd just do some numbers on petrol as well, just as a comparison. So here I've made an assumption that petrol's £1.20 a litre, so we can convert that into a gallon price. Obviously we know how many miles we're going to do, and I've just done an estimate of say 40 miles per gallon, and obviously every car is different. You'd have to do your own numbers on this, but 40 miles to the gallon, and that basically means we need 3.275 gallons of petrol to do 131 miles. And that works out at £17.88 to do 131 miles compared to £2.44. Or if we looked at it in a penny per mile, it's 13.6 pence a mile compared to 1.86 here, or even lower if I do it all in that slot there. So massive difference. It's let's say 12 times the cost to run a petrol car compared to running an EV. So that's something to look at. I also thought it'd be interesting to just make some assumptions on mileage. So in this particular case, I'm making an assumption that we do 12,000 miles a year. And if that was petrol, then that would cost us 1,638 and multiple trips to a petrol station. Whereas with the EV, all I've got to do is stick it on the drive, plug it in, and it's going to cost me £223 for the year. So that's basically £1,400 a year saving in petrol costs, basically. Multiply that over the 3-year life of the car, that's £4,200. Again, I think if we got that number down here, that would be a bigger saving. That would probably tip over £5,000 saving in petrol, which is a big number to look at. Let's just come back to the referral though, because I mentioned earlier that, again, if you sign up with a referral from a friend, then you're going to get £50. And likewise, if you refer a friend once you've got an EV and they do it, you get another £50. So here's an interesting thing, is how much energy and how many miles can I do with £50 worth of fuel? And again, if we're looking at the referral bonus is 50 quid. In this example, again, a worst case scenario, £1.86 a mile, that £50 would buy you 2,688 miles of fuel. And that's just for getting a referral code. Again, if we've got this number down to near 1, then you can start to see the
huge saving that you could make there, and free miles. So again, if you've got a friend who's on Octopus, get a code from them, ask them if they can give you a code. It's available on their website. If there isn't, feel free to use mine. I'll be more than happy to share my £50 with you. That is well worth looking at. You get a few of those, you could basically pay for your fuel for a whole year. It's ridiculous. But of course, this isn't the whole story. There's other things that you need to consider. Firstly, as we talked in the videos before we bought the car, we talked about the £3,000 grant off an EV. We also talked about the fact that you get a contribution for fitting a home charger. So our home charger cost us very little to get installed. What else? Well, also there's no road tax on an EV. So obviously take into account what you're paying in road tax at the moment. That's another saving that you're going to make. And again, I haven't got the numbers on this yet, but my understanding is that the servicing costs are cheaper on an EV because there's less to go wrong as well. It's just electronics rather than mechanical stuff that needs doing. So again, there'll be a cost saving on services as well. But of course, you've got to take into account that an EV is more expensive to purchase. And you know, that's really down to everybody else. It's one of the reasons, rather than buying the car, we decided to lease it, because it's spread the cost of the car over the 3 years, which in turn is effectively spreading the cost of the battery and the fuel that provides. We also, the other reason we did that was because we're not 100% sure what's going to happen with the technology over the next 3 years. We may not want to keep the car 3 years' time. We might want to change it for newer technology. So there's a few things there, but obviously that's one of the key considerations. But of course, what you've got to remember is you're going to be using renewable energy. Octopus is renewable, and therefore there's no pollution coming from their renewable energy. And of course, there's no pollution coming from the car because it's zero emissions. And at the end of the day, I'll let you guys decide as to whether it's worth it, you know, at the end of the day. I suppose the last thing to sum up, really, a few things. I'm not planning on doing another video now until we do a big journey. We've got a long break planned in middle of April, where we'll be going to Harrogate if all goes to plan with lockdowns and release of lockdowns. We've already researched the charges on the public network for that. So we can, you know, reasonably confident we can do that journey. The plan is to report that back to you in middle of April. But between now and then, unless anything strange happens, I've got no more plans to do any more videos at this point in time. So I just want to summarise really as to, firstly, let's just remember, you know, we bought the car, or we got the price for the car via CarWow. I would recommend CarWow definitely as a way of getting quotes for cars. The best price we got was from a company called Fish Brothers in Swindon. Again, Rose at Fish Brothers was great. We did it all over the internet and via phone calls. We didn't actually physically have to go into the dealer, and they arranged for the car to be delivered for us as well during lockdown. So recommend them as well. Obviously, I've recommended Octopus from an energy point of view. By the way, Peugeot, who provided the car, they also, you know, gave us details of how to get the electric point fitted via a company called Pod Point. Again, their installation was great. So all the way through, the process has been great. Things have gone to plan. Really quite pleased. Would I recommend an EV? Absolutely. On maybe two conditions. Firstly, that you can get a home charger. Because you need the convenience of charging from home. It's also significantly cheaper, as you've seen, to charge from home. You wouldn't be paying those prices if you were charging on a public network. So charging from home is key. I honestly can't see how owning an EV is going to work if you can't charge at home. And then the other thing, of course, is what your journey profile's like. I reckon this car could comfortably get 150 miles of range. And if in a day, on your majority of your days of travelling, you are travelling less than 150 mile, then you don't need to use a public charger. You just get home, plug it in, set the timer for midnight, and never visit a petrol station, never visit a public charger at all. If you've got a job, or, you know, the trips that you do are significantly more than the range of the car, then you've got to take into account public charging networks and public charging costs, which again might put you off an EV. But certainly from my point of view, if your majority of your travel is within the range of the car, then it's an absolute no-brainer from my point of view. So hope you found the journey useful and informative. It's been a learning experience for us, and it's something we just wanted to share. Again, tune in middle of April when we do our long road trip. Fingers crossed it happens, and fingers crossed we don't run out of charge on the way to Harrogate. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy. Let's hope lockdown ends soon. And if you've got any comments, drop them in the comments box. If you decide to buy an EV, let me know how you get on. Really interested in how it goes for you all. So take care. Thanks a lot.